Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Langerak-Chuzo. I'm the director of ARIS, the Archive for Research in Archetypal Symbolism, and I would like to welcome you all to today's event. We will be getting right into it, but I do have one exciting announcement before we get going. ARIS has just released a new publication. It's called A Guide to ARIS for analysts, candidates, artists, scholars, students, and any others who love symbolic images. And it is exactly as the title implies, it is a guide to ARIS, who we are, where we came from, how to use ARIS and its resources, and perhaps most importantly, how Jungians, artists, and others have used ARIS and the symbolic method to explore, enrich, and deepen their work. If you would like to check out the guide to ARIS, it is free and it can be found on our website at aris.org/guide. And I believe there'll be a link in the chat to that. And we hope you enjoy it. Now on to today's event. We're very excited to have Kikan Massara back with us today. If you missed her first presentation, you can find the recording at aris.org/events. It was a wonderful event, so I encourage you to check it out. I also want to mention that after today's presentation, we will have some time to take questions. So please submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen at any time during the event. And now I would like to give you an introduction to our presenter. Kikan Massara is a Swedish-born, Paris-based psychotherapist, author, and creative. As a dedicated researcher of consciousness studies, meditation, and emotional health, Kikan has long used art, myths, and symbols to facilitate access to the empowering resources of the inner world. The discovery in her late teens of the works of C.G. Jung and other esoteric literature led her down numerous paths of exploration in adulthood, including complementary and alternative health. These quests eventually formalized in becoming an accredited psychotherapist in the early 1990s in the UK. Holding an MA in psychotherapy and counseling, she has worked as a therapist in London, Stockholm, and Paris. She is also an advanced practitioner of the meridian tapping method, EFT. She's currently working on a book on human emotions and is considering focusing on grief counseling in her practice. Kikan is a longtime friend of ARIS and has spent many hours in our archive. As she says, ARIS seamlessly weaves in and out of her creative life and overall well-being. Welcome, Kikan. Thank you so much for coming back for this second webinar.
Oh, thank you so much, Allison. It is a real joy to be back. And I want to welcome everybody who attended the last time. Welcome, welcome. And also to everyone who is joining us for the first time. This is a very heartfelt welcome to you all. In the last webinar, I was illustrating symbolic perception in terms of the creation of the book, The 12 Steps, Symbols, Myths, and Archetypes of Recovery. And that ended with a series of ideas of how to cultivate symbolic perception, which is what we'll be looking much more closely at today. And if you see this particular painting here of Hiroshi Yoshida above the clouds, it really reminds me of symbolic perception in that it's always looking for an unobstructed view of something. So I'll move along. Well, this is a wonderful quote as far as I'm concerned about symbols themselves. Symbols connect external objects and events to inner psychic reality, and they apprehend more than cool reason can ever comprehend. As signposts, they announce a larger frame of reference, connecting us to the oldest layers of the human mind and mediating between the rational and irrational. Symbols reveal the dualism of all that exists, while they also reconnect poles with each other, building bridges between the conscious and the unconscious. Symbols are messengers of wholeness. With symbols, unity is represented. And this is by Ursula Wirtz. And you know, a lot has been spoken about the symbolic life, if you're at all interested in the world of Carl Jung's work. And I came across his work when I was in my late teens, and it was through the book Memories, Dreams, Reflections. And while I understood about his life, I did not necessarily understand much about his ideas. And but I entered, I absolutely knew this idea of a symbolic life was for me. And I opened, the door to this vast universe of potential and possibilities. And somewhere down the line, I realized that, I'm very practical in my nature. I'm very Swedish in that way. And I always look for something simple when something is complex. And so I just came across this idea that I could just put on symbolic glasses about different matters. And that's what I did. And this has really helped me in terms of living a symbolic life, which I feel that I do. And so, so what is symbolic perception and how do we make it our own? Well, in this painting, we can see far, much further than we could if we were navel gazing in a sort of valley of narrow concern. Symbolic perception, I just put a few words together on this. Symbolic perception is a human faculty whose time has come. It finds a much wider view of all things human than the egocentric perspectives that are so common today. It is, after all, in its nature to find what unifies, not what separates. It seeks the fuller picture and doesn't focus on the parts. Symbolic perception is meant to help us navigate life on Earth, but for many of us, it's gotten rusty. Practically speaking, the idea is to get out of those valleys of narrow concern and up onto the mountainside, where we get a view. I mean, here with Monet's painting, we get the view of the sea, we get the view of a distant church, we get a view of trees and nature. And through a symbolic lens, we can look at our human concerns also with empathy, even curiosity, and solutions are easier to notice. By putting on symbolic glasses, we plug into a more intuitive reading of our issues. This may be experienced as a whole body way of knowing, and is very different to the experience of thinking our way to understanding something. It's not about interpreting, but sensing the personal meaning something has for us. And symbolic sight is breathtaking in its capacity to connect the dots of a fuller picture in many different areas of life, and has an astonishing way of reconciling opposing influences, contradictions, polarities, and complexities that are encountered personally as well as collectively. It reveals the beauty of the whole beyond the parts, beyond the differences. And so the contrasting approach to symbolic perception is taking things literally. And this comes at a peril today. So here we have a few quotes. Anselm Kiefer suggests that we live in a world of broken images. And T.S. Eliot, where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? And Jules Cashford, reasoning is knowledge gained about something, not knowledge which changes you, or which you have to change to know. Because whether we want it or not, we live in a world that is being interpreted for us, and it is getting increasingly difficult to tell truth from fiction. And information and knowledge is moving so fast, and it amplifies on a daily basis. So it's not so strange. It's actually very understandable that many of us fear being left behind, missing out, not keeping what we have, maybe losing what we want, or losing what we have and not getting what we want. And I mean, it's like we live in an atmosphere where also a lot of people around the world are making their living on taking things literally. They have personal opinions that they promote relentlessly, and they comment and judge and evaluate. And it's become a challenge not to become very opinionated oneself. Not to take things literally is very difficult. We're bombarded by information and stuff. So, and what happens, of course, is then we point the finger at others, and we blame them and we shame them. And all of this is really just perpetuating false perceptions about truth, about the nature of reality, about what's going on. And the human psyche needs peace and quiet, to thrive. But instead, we're at the mercy of effects like confusion, overwhelm, can be, energetically depleting, etc., to be at the mercy of all of this literalism, you could call it. And at the heart of it is what has been coined as the arms race for human attention, because human attention has become a commodity. And in that, we become pitted against one another instead of being brought together, which, I mean, surely, in my humble opinion, is what is needed, that we come together. And this is not the case with symbolic perception, because in its nature is, its nature is about unifying and not separating. So the Greek meaning, the Greek word for symbol is symbolon, which means to throw together the two halves of the original whole. And there is a very soulful element to symbolic perception, and that is that it connects us up with the nature of reality, which is interconnected and interdependent. Contemporary physics show us that on a fundamental level, this is the case. We are unified. And so it also has that element to it. But of course, what we're talking about are different states of consciousness. And but the good news about different states of consciousness, of course, is that they are cultivated, and we can learn to know which states of consciousness we're in, and even use symbols to remind ourselves, which state of mind we're in. And I remember doing this. There was a time when I was particularly busy. I had one very young child, I had one teenager, and I was studying and I was working, etc., etc., etc. And I wanted to learn mindfulness. And I had really very little time to sort of sit and practice it. So I used as a symbol a little sun, which I stuck, well, actually, I got Indian henna and put it, in the center of my left hand, on the palm of my left hand. So using my hands all the time, I was endlessly reminded of the here and now, and the here and now, and the here and now. And also when, talking about symbolic perception, there are so many benefits to looking at things symbolically. We can kind of use it, really. You can try it on anything. Whether personally, we can look at our relationships, our livelihood, our health, our growth, our spiritual practices, what have you. We can look at all of these things and relate to them through symbolic perception. And from a collective perspective, we can also do that, whether we are helping or supporting others, whether we are of service in the community, or whether we want to look at global events. And so here we got Magritte, the Belgian painter, who absolutely loved paradoxes and metaphors and endlessly showed them in his work. And you could say that he's absolutely right, if you look to the right, of saying that this is not an apple, because it's an image of an apple. And this reminds me of how symbolic perception very, very often is about inner images. How symbolic perception has a visual lens somehow. And so when we want to engage, we need to know our associations to different things. So for example, here we can say, okay, this is not an apple, and yet it evokes apples within us. And so what is the first thing that comes to mind when we think about an apple? Is there an image for it? I get a green apple. We could ask, what image memories emerge or rise when I think about the apples of my life. And I got a hint, I've got an image memory of picking up a green apple on the ground. There were lots of them that had fallen, and trying to eat it, it was very hard, and getting a stomachache. And if this is not an apple, but if it is a symbol that has importance to us, then we can engage and go on deeper journeys by just getting into the associations that we have. So let's look at some of these portals to cultivation of symbolic perception. I used this slide in the last presentation, and it really struck me that these are ways in, these are ways that stimulate symbolic perception. So we have art, and we have storytelling, and myths, and dreams, and poetry and muses, symbols, and I kind of mean symbolic objects with that, rituals, sacred sites, living questions, stillness, and awe. So let's cross the threshold through this rather intriguing portal that is actually on the Baffin Island in Canada. I love this image, which I found at Arras, of course, in one of the books there. We cross the threshold and we land on art. Now, art and symbolic perception, the connections are absolutely huge. Because whether we create art or whether we behold art or whether we heal or help with art or we awaken with art, we engage with inner and outer images that have the power to change our states of consciousness. So the arts are conduits really for symbolic perception, whether we notice this or not. And these suggestions are probably very well known to us, you know. I suggest doodle and color mandalas, paint, draw and watercolor, collect images and postcards, collage issues and challenges, flick through art books and go to exhibitions, photograph and film. And when it comes to creating art, which most of these are, then I just want to read this quote by Georgia O'Keeffe, which is, I found I could say things in color and shapes that I couldn't say any other way, things I had no words for. And this is not one of hers. It is by Hermann Hesse, the author, who was also a painter. And, you know, with the creation of art, I mean, there is a wonderful quote also by Susan Magsamen and Ivy Ross from their book, The Brain on Art. It is, think of the arts as an activity that changes your biology, emotional state, and enhances your mental well-being. It's very, very powerful. And Jung was convinced that image was key. I mean, that whether it was an inner image, an outer image, whether it was in terms of process or product. And he famously said that the years when I was pursuing my inner images were the most important in my life. In them, everything essential was decided. Well, you know, that's how he came to really understand or create or present his model of the human psyche, of the approaches to it. And I mean, it changed everything in terms of, well, I don't know if it changed everything, but it certainly, his years of inner images, they certainly, as he says, were the most important. And everything essential was decided then. But he also was convinced that creative imagination is the only primordial phenomenon accessible to us. The real ground of the psyche, the only immediate reality. Now, that is really a big statement, you know. the primordial, the real ground of the psyche, the only immediate reality. Creative imagination is that. That's really big as far as I'm concerned. But being a painter himself, Jung was also very interested in finding out the artist's secret. And what he meant with that was a process that allowed the artist to serve a mediating role in the culture. Now, the artist's secret is explained very sweetly in a story about, it's well-known story about a woodcarver in the Taoist text, Chuang Tzu. So, I'm going to read to you about it. Once there was a master carver named King who created a beautiful bell stand for a prince who greatly admired it and asked King to reveal what his secret was. King explained that before carving the piece, he had to set his mind at rest through fasting and forgetting and not being concerned with the results. Then he said, I went to the forest to see the trees in their natural state. When the right tree appeared before my eyes, the bell stand also appeared in it, clearly, beyond doubt. All I had to do was put forth my hand and begin. If I had not met this particular tree, there would have been no bell stand at all. And this experience of being a channel for creation is known to many. And let's just take a look at Monet's Andromeda emerging out of the marble. Now, when it comes to beholding art, George Bernard Shaw suggested that when you use a glass mirror to see your face, you use a glass mirror to see your face. You use works of art to see your soul. So historically, art has also been used as spiritual processes and as a way of transmitting states of consciousness. And a friend of mine who studied painting in the Far East told me about one approach to this. And that was that first you cultivated a state of being that you wanted to transmit in your work. And in that state, you wove the canvas. And then in that state, you brought it to a priest or a holy man to be blessed. And in that state, you created the pigments for the paint. And then in that state, you did the first layer of the painting, which was, in her experience, the sacred geometry of a deity. And, transmission of states of consciousness through art is very known in, religious art and different cultures from Egyptian onwards. And it's very noticeable in the Tibetan tradition, and there is one which is called the Descending Buddha or the Welcoming Buddha. And these paintings are placed near the dying to remind and reassure them of the welcome that they will have past physical death. And sometimes a string is tied to the person and the painting. Now, when it comes to healing or helping with art, well, for years I've collected images of all kinds and a lot of postcards as well, and they have a wild bunch of range of motives, from faces to sculptures to houses to geometry to weather to, I mean, it goes on and on. And so when the occasion comes to use this, to put them to use, you know, I spread them. This is the postcard collection on the right. I spread them in a circle or a semicircle, a bit like a tarot reader would, and to be able to pull them. And so I then have, you know, it can be absolutely fascinating to do this. And, you know, there are lots and lots and lots of possibilities. I mean, these are just a few. All of these can be portals into all kinds of explorations and healings and journeys of transformation. Yeah. And you imagine what could follow if you pull a card of an abandoned house. It could be an incredible journey that you could, just this one image could lead to. And that was the case for me in an experience that I had, and I actually wrote it down. So I'm going to share that with you. It was yet another magical day at Arras. A reflection of the blue sky caught my eye in a pavement puddle and had already heralded the research theme of the day, symbols of God. Not something I was entirely comfortable with. I was a seeker for sure, but had issues with organized religion, and that's where God seemed to belong. From the moment this image came to me that day, the way that images just do at Arras, a breathtaking inner knowing rose inside that a tender relationship with this mystery was possible for me. My childhood imago Dei had always made me feel judged and criticized. It was the one-eyed image of God that saw everything. Never was I enough. Never was I worthy. But this was not the case when I looked at this quiet image. And for many years now, it has softened me again and again. There's tenderness and a profound sense of being connected, of belonging, of being home. That state of being has encouraged faith to grow in the unseen and for beliefs to sink in that, yes, the universe is benevolent. This image always seems to balance the heaven and earth within me. One day, when I was walking past the Grand Palais in Paris, I felt a pull to go in and see an exhibition about the Gupta period in India. And at one point, you have to climb some stairs to see the rest of the exhibition. And there, in that very space, stood this sculpture. It was as if my love for it had brought us eye to eye. It felt so immense that it's taken me years to tell anybody. So, over to you. Do you think that art could be a portal in to symbolic perception, if that is something that intrigues you or you want more of? Now, so the next portal is storytelling. And like art, storytelling is exceptional. It's an exceptional portal to symbolic perception because stories connect us to the very roots of our human collective. Uh, and I mean, well, there's much to say about storytelling, but Joanna Macy uses the term great story when she speaks about storytelling. It is, quote, like a force field charging the many incidents of our personal history with meaning and significance. Great story plays upon our minds like a symphony, activating different tones, themes, feelings, and fancies, illuminating parts of ourselves we didn't know we had. When we join great story, we align our lives with evolutionary forces that carry us beyond old agendas into new ways of being. Now, the world is made of stories, and we are narrative beings with brains that are storytellers in themselves. So not only do we think in stories, but we can turn just about everything that happens to us into stories we tell others. And so the opportunity to engage in storytelling just goes on and on throughout life. I don't think it ever changes. And here the ideas are, share your life stories and listen to other people's stories. And create your own once upon a time. Dialogue with story characters. Read fairy tales last thing at night. Rephrase undermining stories you tell yourself. These two figures are from 5000 BC. We've been at it for a long time. And of course, in today's world, there are such extraordinary mutual help groups. I advocate 12-step fellowships in the sense that they are very much about sharing stories, and they can address all kinds of subjects that are of concern today. And here we have Khalil Gibran. My friend, you and I shall remain strangers unto life and unto one another, and each unto himself, until the day when you shall speak and I shall listen, deeming your voice my own voice, and when I shall stand before you, thinking myself standing before a mirror. Well, that's what stories and sharing and listening and hearing do. I mean, it's incredible what can come, if you write down once upon a time there was. It just flows. And I really love this painting. It's called Noir, which means black. And the painter has written what black means to him. Black as, black as, black as. And who doesn't love fairy tales? I mean, I have some old fairy tale books, and the East of the Sun and West of the Moon is one of them. That's why I had to bring it in. Been with me for a long time. Look at those illustrations. Just love them. And here we have Arabian Nights, God, the adventures that you can go on by reading these. And, well, I was brought up in the north of Sweden, so of course, there are lots of woods there. So can you imagine how reassuring it is for a little girl to see a little barefoot little princess in the middle of the mossy wood kissing a big bear on the nose because she worries about him. And to the right we have, you know, The Ugly Duckling, Andersen's fairy tale. And I remember being absolutely seared with pain for this poor thing, this outsider story, this, you know, outsider of the community story with a happy ending. It took a while to get there, but... And then as a teenager, you know, Rapunzel on the right, I mean, this is very much what it felt like. It felt like I was locked into this tower and I was just waiting to get out, or to get rescued for that matter. And so fairy tales, they bring us to all kinds of landscapes. And sometimes they save our lives, because here we have Scheherazade, Zad, it's hard to remember how to pronounce it, who, with her sultan, and for 1,001 nights, she told him stories to stay alive day by day, but she never let him know the ending. So she would get another day. And after 1,001 nights, he gave up and they stayed married. Now, not far away from stories and storytelling, we have myths. And the human race has always used symbols to express its awareness of the dynamic creative forces underlying existence, variously believed to be the elements, the gods, and the cosmos, or the cosmos. At a more conscious level, symbols, particularly symbolic stories such as myths and legends, have been used to express abstract qualities such as truth, justice, heroism, mercy, wisdom, courage, and love. In Jungian terms, we are all born with instinctive predispositions toward these qualities, a set of internal blueprints of what it means to be fully human. And that is very much what myths do for us. They have the mysterious capacity to contain and communicate paradoxes, allowing us to see through, around, and over the dilemma to the real heart of the matter. Those are words by Liz Green and Juliet Sharman Burke. And there is I mean, why are they so important? Because in terms of connecting myths being portals, well, there is no difference really between looking at things through a mythical lens and a symbolic lens. And there is a myth and a story to most predicaments that are known to us humans. And they help us make sense of the peaks and valleys of human life on Earth. Now, the author and storyteller, Michael Meade, he speaks about two storylines going on at once in human life. And one of these is the cosmos, which is constantly recreating itself through rhythms and cycles of creation, endings, and renewals. Things come to an end and begin again at predictable points and critical times. The other storyline in stories and myths is about the human soul. It is born into this dance of cosmic creation and tries to find its way of participating in the dance. There is a story inscribed for each person, unique and individual. A plot line is trying to break through the wall of time and live into the world of creation. A mythical story is trying to be lived out through each human being. So, what is it? What is my story? What is my myth? What is trying to be born? What is the story trying to be born through me? How do I embody it? How do I embrace it? How do I embody it? And so these ideas here, you know, they're pretty obvious. Delve into the world of myths and find your favorites. Notice the qualities of inspiring characters. Identify their obstacles and themes of learning. Read creation myths in times of trouble. Describe the myth you want to live. You know, the great myths. We have King Arthur and the heroes myths. We've got St. Michael. Just remember Psyche and Amor. And I remember it took me a long time. I've read it several times before I realized that at every time that she was faced with these impossible tasks that were set by Aphrodite, she believed that she could not do them. And of course, they were impossible, so how could she do them? But she felt absolutely convinced she couldn't do them and achieve them, and yet she did, because she got help every single time. Sort of like life, isn't it? And then we have all the wonderful, mesmerizing tales, myths from other cultures. You know, I was just in Sweden. Or yes, the extraordinary mythical bird Simurgh. Well, so much for myths. Let's move on to dreams. And dreams, they are, in terms of being a portal, they are really like the royal road, aren't they, to symbolic perception, because they already speak in the languages of the unconscious, whether they are visual, metaphoric, paradoxical, intuitive, or, you know, well, symbolic, really. And Jung wrote in the Red Book that dreams were the guiding words of the soul, and that's what they can feel like. You know, can feel like conversations that we have with ourselves, with some parts of ourselves, and they serve so many purposes. And once upon a time, I trained as a dream teacher, and then I was very keen on the different purposes of different dreams. You know, were they informing me, or were they hinting, or what were they doing? You know, but I very rarely look at them like that now. I see dreams as something truly magical, and I just want to honor and respect them. And by writing them down, I write them down. And a lot of it has to do with also wanting to show that I'm willing to listen, and that I'm open to being guided by something that is much greater than myself, my little conscious self. And it's a bit like wanting to keep the channel between the conscious and the unconscious well oiled. So that's why I write them down. Not to understand, but to relate to them. And here, the ideas, write down our night dreams. Well, yeah. Paint the colorful dreams. My dream teacher did that. Daydream. Daydreaming is so important. And image dreaming. And visualize our hopes, dreams, and longings. and empty mental clutter in morning pages. You know, they were recommended by Julia Cameron in The Artist Way, which is very, very, a very good book, a very good approach. And then we have, whoops, yeah, oh no, this is the one. We have Dreamtime represented, and Vishnu is dreaming dimensions into place. We have the 7 sleepers, which is a myth in both in Christian storytelling and Islamic storytelling as well. Some people refer to these 7 sleepers as different states of consciousness. I haven't looked into that at all. And then we have a little Pablo Picasso, The Dream. And this book, this image I used in the book that I wrote, because I feel that creative visualization is really extraordinary, you know, to think in pictures and to repeatedly visualize hopes and dreams. Why not? I don't do much of it, but I know that creative visualization, because I don't really want to decide what happens, you know, but I know that if you actually use creative visualization in ways that where you feel that what you're creatively visualizing already exists, that you're very likely to get it. So that is, I just love this image. It's Alea. It's, so come to poetry. And poetry, well, it serves as a conduit to symbolic perception because of the use of metaphors and paradoxes, but also because poetry is very good at reconciling these. And I'm going to let the poet speak here. So T.S. Eliot, he suggested that poets dislocate language into meaning. I like that. He also thought that every poem affects all other poems ever written. And the contemporary poet David Whyte, he suggests that poetry is a language against which we have no defenses. While Hafiz, you know, the Persian visionary lyrical poet in the 14th century, he wrote this line: a poet is someone who can pour light into a cup, then raise it to nourish your beautiful, parched, holy heart. And then these lines, which I could cry every time I read them. I wish I could show you, when you're lonely or in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being. So a good poem can move us, it can awaken us, it can inflame us, it can break through our denial, it can trouble us, nudge us, it can calm us, soothe us. And it's very good at reminding us about what really matters. And so here the suggestions are pretty straightforward. Read poetry, write poetry, illustrate poetry, create blackout poems, collect metaphors, and tolerate the tension of paradoxes. This is the poet Christina Rossetti. To the right is a blackout poem. This is the first time that I ever saw one. And what is not blacked out are the words. Less words and more pictures. I found it when I lived in New York in the 70s and 80s. Tolerate the tension. Handle paradoxes. And this brings us, so close to poetry, to the muses. And they remind us of the multidimensional nature of reality, which is something that symbolic side absolutely engages with as well. And the painter Edgar Degas wrote that muses work all day long and then at night get together and dance. But then he also painted a lot of ballerinas. And the composer Tchaikovsky believed that the muse does not come without being called. And I would tend to agree with that. I think it's really important to call on the muses. I mean muses, not just the muse. And the musician Nick Cave has noted that most people wait for the muse to turn up. That's terribly unreliable. I have to sit down and pursue the muse by attempting to work. So I've encountered my muses over time, and they are now quite a motley crew of people I have long admired, some deities, but also this sense of having invisible helpers and heavenly supporters, as I call them. And I call upon them when I engage with creative work, and I call upon them when I'm stuck, and I try to actually say thank you, because they do show up. And I try to remember to say thank you every day that I, at the end of a long day's work, because they were there. So visualize personal muses, imagine invisible supporters, invite their presence before creating, ask for support with the task at hand, call on them when stuck, show your appreciation. It's kind of what I shared. And of course, in Greek mythology, you had the 9 muses. They often are portrayed with wings, not here. But you can see one of them to the right, that's the muse of history. And I don't know in the studio to the left if this is if it's a model or if it is his muse. And Cézanne, he thought that being inspired was to be kissed by the muse. So that's the name of this painting. And I personally feel that it's being just like struck by light. Which takes us to symbols. And as I said, symbolic objects. Well, they are portals to symbolic sites because, using the idea of symbolic objects, they grow imbued with the energy of our associations, and they usually symbolize things that really matter to us. So they grow imbued by this energy of our intentions and associations. And being close to our symbols allows us to work, or to walk, the path of the literal as well as the mythical at once. So we can have a very regular life, but as long as we have a few symbolic objects around us that remind us of the other reality, we're walking both. And I remember a woman it was like 3 decades ago, it was on the northern shore of Bali, the island, and she told me that she spent her entire morning cleaning and attending to her ritual objects and to, doing her ritual connections with her deities. I'm not sure what she did quite there. But in the conversation, she just said to me, well, these are living beings and they need to know that I care and that I love them. I was always struck by that. And well, here the suggestions are to live with symbols that reflect what matters to us and to place symbols where they attract our attention and communicate with our symbols and carry small symbols with you. I mean, I have one. No, wait a minute. I thought that I had one in my pocket. Use symbols of reconciliation for polarized issues. Yes. Take loving care of your symbols. I just have a few, these are not mine, they are just symbolic objects that I love. And the idea of using symbols, to reconcile polarities. If I, this Gottlieb painting, it sort of speaks, it's called Mist. It speaks of moments of confusion or lack of clarity. And I use, I'm very dedicated to Jung's ideas of tolerating the tension of polarities, because, he suggested that the evolution of human consciousness, the collective consciousness of humanity, evolves through these encounters of polarities that need to be reconciled. And so I feel that I see this often in my own life. So what I do is, here's a little placeholder of just the flower of life. So I put one crystal that represents something that is one polarity, and then I add another one that represents the other one. Now I have the polarities, and then I placed a symbol of a torus, the oh gosh, I don't know what it's called. It's a toroidal energy. That is the spiral, the double spiral at the center. And then there's a tiny little Ganesha at the top, the god who'd removed obstacles. So I deal with it partly, these complications in my life, I deal with them partly in these simple symbolic ways. Because I'll see them and I'll relate to them, and I know that they're in processes of reconciling, and the tension and the discomfort of things not being clear, I can handle them because I know that this is also working on their behalf. And yeah, and then we have, that's a ritual. So now we are on to rituals, and they serve our symbolic life by grounding our inner work and our processes and our intentions and insights into physical reality. And Rumi suggested that work in the invisible world at least as hard as you do in the visible. And Robert A. Johnson, that wonderful author, and Jungian analyst, suggested this: the role of ritual in the growth of consciousness is related to its power to make symbolic experience into something physical and concrete. Although we can understand the meaning of symbols with our minds, our understanding is made immeasurably deeper and more concrete when we feel the symbols, with our bodies and our feelings. The symbol becomes a living reality for us. And here the ideas that I propose is to include simple rituals in everyday life, and to dedicate each ritual to serve the good of all, to create and energize shrines, to close inner work with a ritual gesture. That Robert Johnson taught me that. Honor the yearly seasons and cycles, yes, and celebrate synchronicity. Dedication. I think dedication is really wonderful. All inner work really it benefits from being dedicated, and you can use anything, we can use anything, but I like to use for the good of all. I love this image. And I took this photographer 10 years to photograph the colors of the moon. But we live in cycles and seasons and rhythms. And when we acknowledge them, today is the full moon. And today is also a lunar eclipse. And I think there's something about acknowledging that we are living in cosmic forces that are way bigger than ourselves. Which takes us to one of my favorite subjects, which is sacred sites. And they connect up with symbolic perception because they are specifically created to be portals to other states of consciousness, but also they serve many different purposes, sacred sites. So I put together a little something here. The history of our species is being rewritten today. Our ancestors possessed extraordinary knowledge and skills in order to construct the ancient temples, megaliths, pyramids, and other sacred sites we see in the thousands on Earth. They knew how to operate natural laws. To construct these monuments, our ancestors had to have a solid understanding of the flow of subtle energy, telluric earth energy, and cosmic energy as well, and of sound, resonance, geometry, mathematics, gravity, electricity, frequency, harmony, astronomy, as well as an intimate awareness of a multidimensional universe. These sacred sites once formed an interconnected grid of power places across the world. They were always built on geomagnetic hotspots with precisely chosen materials, stones, very, very precise, and engineered into place with technologies that we do not have and still baffle us. I've been to some of those places. They were built for different purposes, from harnessing, storing, generating, and directing energy from the earth as well as the cosmos to increase crop yields and human fertility. Many purposes like that. And they also served as places of assembly, were used for rituals, oaths, pledges, marriages, and other mutual agreements, and were used for inducing altered states, near-death experiences, and journeys to other dimensions and realms. Um, Walt Whitman, I and this mystery, here we stand. Seek out sacred sites. They're everywhere. There are hundreds of thousands across the world. Engage with their mystery. Notice their energy and vibration. Explore sacred geometry. Create your own mandalas. Cultivate experiences that bring unity. This is the Chartres Cathedral Labyrinth, which is not too far away from here. Yeah. As author and researcher Freddie Silva, he does wonderful work on these subjects. As he points out, nearly all of the time that humans have existed, regular conversations across dimensions were a natural part of everyday life. This was a good friend of Leonardo da Vinci. And here we got God as a creator. And to the right, tetrahedrons. And this is the first version of Blake's Newton, painting of Newton. Geometry sound suspended, matter is light suspended, suggests Robert Edward Grant. And we see, you know, this sacred, or this the geometry and everything. I love these snowflakes. Which brings us to living questions. Now, symbolically and literally, they reflect that we exist in a web of connections and never need to feel alone with our concerns. So being human and spiritual at once creates a bunch of problems, and it's not always easy to acknowledge that there are limits to what we can do on our own. But when we do know the limits that we have, then it becomes easier to ask for help and to receive it. And so living questions can be really about absolutely anything, but they can also be quite existential. And Albert Einstein thought that the most fundamental question we can ever ask ourselves is whether or not the universe we live in is friendly or hostile. And teacher and author Jean Houston thought it most wise to live these three questions. What do I want from the universe? What does the universe want from me? What do we, the universe and I, want together? And here are a few suggestions. Pay attention to questions within. Send your questions into the night. Call upon the heavens for guidance. Stay curious about their answers. Capture inspirations and insights. And notice subtle hunches. Oh, this drum of the cosmos. Hand of the desert in the Atacama in Chile. Mario Irarrázaval. I tried to reach this man many times. Impossible. Can we receive? we are arriving in stillness and as a portal, and stillness is the ground of our being, and it's where our true nature, you could say, dwells in silence. And without silence and stillness, to nourish and inspire us, it would be very hard to live a symbolic life. Just as water seeks its own level, the mind will gravitate toward the holy. Muddy water will become clear if allowed to stand undisturbed, and so too will the mind become clear if it is allowed to be still. That's Deng Ming Dao. Herein lies the whole secret of existence. Waves may roll over the surface and tempest rage, but deep down there is a stratum of infinite calmness, infinite peace, and infinite bliss. Vivekananda. And Franz Kafka, here goes. You do not need to leave your room. Just remain sitting at your table and listen. You do not even need to listen. Just wait. You do not even need to wait. Just become still, silent, and solitary. And the world will freely offer itself to you and be unmasked. It has no choice. It will roll in ecstasy at your feet. Be generous with time for silence and stillness, and return often to our still point. Behold sacred art. Draw meditatively with the eyes closed. Allow space for uncertainty and appreciate emptiness. This is Aditi, the goddess of the void and creation. What to speak after that? So awe is, it relates to symbolic perception in that it's the state of consciousness that experiences the wonder of life, the miracle of life. And it's a place where it feels like everything has its place in the universe, you know. There is, like Jung said, there is an invisible order in all chaos. There is an invisible order. And some thoughts around that. The moment one gives close attention to anything, even a blade of grass, it becomes mysterious, awesome, indescribably magnified world in itself. Henry Miller. The possession of knowledge does not kill the sense of wonder and mystery. There is always more mystery. That's Anais Nin. I have observed the power of the watermelon seed. It has the power of drawing from the ground and through itself 200,000 times its weight. When you can tell me how it takes this material and out of it colors an outside surface beyond the imitation of art, and then forms inside of it a white rind, and within that again a red heart, thickly inlaid with black seeds, each one of which in turn is capable of drawing through itself 200,000 times its weight. When you can explain to me the mystery of the watermelon, you can ask me to explain the mystery of God. William Jennings Bryan. Allow yourself to be playful. Encourage curiosity. Open to the wonders of life. Be awestruck by Mother Nature. Look for patterns of connection and open to states of oneness. Mother Earth, Father Sky, and the sea and water, dawn and dusk, this had to come. It's from the north of Norway this time. The sun. And so we end this part of the presentation with the idea of the divine child. It's not quite a watermelon that she's standing on, but, you know, the spirit of the child is really awe and wonder. And so I just, sort of a final word, if you want, is that we live in a world of the literal, and it would be so wonderful if we can balance it with symbolic sight as well. So over to you, Alison, if there are questions, and I'll be happy to answer. I don't know how we're doing for time. Goodness, little time.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Kikan. That was just absolutely beautiful. And those images, wow, just incredible to see those illustrating all of your steps here towards symbolic perception. We do have a lot of questions, and I just want to say right off the bat, we're not going to get to all of them, but hopefully in the next week or so, maybe we can address everything that's been sent in, maybe not on the webinar, but separately.
Yeah.
But we do have a question that I want to get to first, which is, do you offer any workshops on developing symbolic perception?
I haven't organized any, but I'm totally open to it if I don't have to deal with the logistics. So I can, if people get together and they want to do something, to approach me. I mean, I'm open and willing.
Wonderful. I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in that. We did have a question from Karen regarding that music was not specifically mentioned as a portal. And just want to say, can you suggest any ways for someone who may be more auditory and not as visual to become more visual?
Well, I mean, it's very clear that there are many conduits of art, and it is just my predisposition to visual arts that made these choices. There is I cannot recommend, I mean, it's very difficult for me to recommend in terms of auditory, conduits or channels, but I can say that for somebody who wants to be more visually inclined or symbolically inclined, there's a wonderful, wonderful method called image streaming, which is, oh goodness, how do I synthesize it? You can look it up. It is a very simple technique where you you close your eyes, you tune into the first image that comes, you speak it out loud as if you're in the presence of somebody else, and you as in the most sensory way you can, you know, the color, the sense of it, and you continue for 10 minutes. And what it does is that it bridges the two or different parts of the brain, because only 2% is linked to word and word concepts, and that is adapted to the speed with which we use our language. Whereas these internal image streams, they are ongoing, they're very elaborate in terms of commenting on what is going on, and they're really, really magnificent. Very little of it comes to our conscious awareness. So I would recommend for anyone who would like to become more symbolically perceptive to do some image streaming. I hope that answered your question.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have a question. What is the name of your book? If you can just tell everyone the name of your book that you referred to in your lecture.
Yes, certainly. It's called The 12 Steps, Symbols, Myths, and Archetypes of Recovery. It uses art to describe, well, processes of healing and recovery, and it uses the context, you know, of the 12 steps that AA created originally, that is now used for many different processes. Yeah.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and just wanted to ask, can you give an example of using symbolic perception for a family conflict?
When it comes to relationships, I feel that they can be seen through this archetypal lens that is incredibly helpful, or through parts. I mean, you know, internal family systems use parts. My personal favorite is plays. You know, I really, really love looking at conflicts, family conflicts, for example, through the lens of a play, because it's, you know, I even could just, I position myself in the audience, right, and then I look at the play, and I can sort of spot who I am in this in this performance, which is very helpful, and what roles other people are playing. And then I can just see what the audience would like my character to do, what other characters could do. I feel that we need to create the spaciousness of sitting on the side of the mountain and overlooking the whole situation in order to connect up with the dynamics of the family. There are many, many stories and plays and films and series, you know, that are concerned, but that concern the most known conflicts that emerge. So for me, it is how to identify what something greater would like me to do, because this always boils down to that it begins with us. That's a real abbreviation of a big subject. Yes.
Yes, I'm sure there's a lot to say regarding that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap things up at this point, but thank you so much, Kikan, for being with us and for sharing this with us. It's very clear from all of the comments that we've received that people just absolutely were inspired. And I just want to thank everyone for being here today. And if we didn't get to your questions again, hopefully we'll be able to get to them in the coming days.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I apologize for running over time and not giving enough space to those questions, and definitely they can be related to in the coming period without question.
great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your presence.
And please feel free to check out our website at eris.org, where you'll find Kikan's first presentation along with our fully digitized collection of images. and along with other things like a concordance of Jung's collected works and our new guide to Eris. Please check that out. I hope you enjoy it. And thank you all for being here with us, and we hope to see you again soon.